Kweku stood in his field as the sun climbed high, spreading its heat across the land. The sound of his hoe striking the soil mixed with the rustling of leaves in the light breeze. He worked with steady rhythm, a humble farmer devoted to his craft. His neighbors often remarked on his dedication, calling him the man who tills even the earth's secrets. As he bent to lift a basket of yams, his hand faltered. His body trembled slightly before collapsing onto the ground. A sharp cry rang out as a young boy working nearby dropped his tools and ran toward him. "Kweku has fallen," he shouted. Within moments, villagers surrounded Kweku. One touched his wrist, another pressed their ear to his chest. They shook their heads grimly. "He has no breath," one murmured. "His spirit has gone to join the ancestors." Elder Mbeki arrived, leaning heavily on his staff. He observed Kweku's still body and sighed deeply. "Prepare the rites," he commanded. "The ancestors have called him home." Kweku's wife sat at the edge of the village square, her face buried in her hands. Her wails echoed through the air as other women gathered to console her. "Why him?" she cried. "He was strong, he was kind. Why would the ancestors take him so soon?" Elder Mbeki approached her with a solemn expression. "Daughter, the ancestors do not act without reason. Trust their wisdom, even in grief." The villagers began preparations for Kweku's farewell. His body was carefully washed and wrapped in white cloth, symbolizing purity and readiness for the journey to the ancestors. Bibiya, the elder storyteller, stood by the sacred fire, chanting names of their forebears. Her voice carried a deep reverence, as though she were speaking directly to the spirits. "Guide Kweku as he crosses the great river," she intoned. "Welcome him with open arms." As the funeral rites continued, strange events began to unfold. The sacred fire, which had burned steadily throughout the day, flickered violently before extinguishing completely. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "What does this mean?" a young woman whispered. "The ancestors are displeased," muttered an elder. Moments later, a faint tremor shook the ground. Pots rattled, and the animals grew restless. Chickens clucked loudly, while the village dogs howled as though sensing an unseen presence. "These are not normal signs," Elder Mbeki said, his voice edged with unease. "The ancestors are trying to tell us something." Fear spread among the villagers. Some speculated that Kweku's spirit had been troubled by unfinished business. Others worried that the entire village had fallen out of favor with the ancestors. As the final prayer was recited, the elders began to lower Kweku's body into the ground. Bibiya raised her hands in the air, her voice resonating with authority. "Ancestors, receive him. Let his spirit find peace." Suddenly, a murmur swept through the crowd. Kweku's hand twitched, then his chest heaved and he sat up slowly, his eyes wide and unblinking. A collective scream rose as villagers stumbled backward in shock. "He's alive!" someone shouted. "No, he's not alive. This is a curse," another cried. Kweku's voice broke through the chaos, low and firm. "The ancestors have spoken. There is danger among us." The crowd fell silent, but the tension in the air was palpable. Some villagers whispered prayers under their breath, while others backed away, unwilling to stand near Kweku. Elder Mbeki stepped forward cautiously. "Kweku," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "What are you saying? What danger do you speak of?" Kweku turned to him, his gaze steady and unreadable. "The ancestors showed me the truth. There is a curse upon this village. Something was stolen long ago, an artifact meant to protect us. Until it is returned, we will not know peace." The villagers returned to the square, but the mood was fractured. Some were convinced that Kweku carried a divine message. "He has been chosen," one woman said. "The ancestors brought him back to warn us." Others were less certain. "No, good can come from a man who rises from the dead," Adisa argued. "He will bring misfortune." The arguments grew louder as families took sides. Long-buried grudges resurfaced. "Your family has always thought themselves favored by the ancestors," one man spat. "Perhaps this is your punishment." "It is not my family's fault," the accused retorted. Perhaps it was your kin who brought the curse. Elder. Mbeki called for calm, striking his staff against the ground. This division will only anger the ancestors further, he warned. We must listen to what Kweku has to say. Kweku stood before the gathered villagers, his voice carrying a new authority. The ancestors showed me a vision. They spoke of an artifact, a sacred staff that was stolen generations ago. It was meant to protect the bond between us and the spirit world, but its theft brought a curse upon this village. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. What staff? One man asked. I've never heard of it. It was hidden, Kweku replied, and its story was buried. But the curse it brought has lingered. Unless it is found and restored, this village will face ruin. Elder Mbeki stroked his beard thoughtfully. And where is this artifact? Now? He asked. Kweku closed his eyes, as though recalling the vision. It lies in a place guarded by shadows and trials of the spirit. The path will not be easy, but it must be walked, the villagers murmured among themselves. This is madness, Adisa said, his tone sharp. We cannot risk our lives chasing a story from a man who should be dead. And what if he speaks? The truth? Another villager countered. Can we afford to ignore the ancestors' warning? Elder Mbeki raised his hand for silence. Enough, he said firmly. Kweku, if you truly carry the ancestors' message, then you must lead us. But know this, if you are wrong, the blame will fall on you. Kweku met the elder's gaze without flinching. I will do what the ancestors have commanded. The truth must be revealed, the villagers whispered as Kweku walked into the village. Square, his steps slow and deliberate. It was clear something had changed in him. His eyes, once full of warmth and humility, now seemed distant, as if he were seeing a world beyond their reach. He did not greet anyone as he passed, only nodding slightly, his face unreadable. The sounds of daily life continued around him. Children, playing, women weaving baskets, but an uneasy tension hung in the air. Is that Kweku? Asked one villager, his voice low. Does he look the same to you? Another responded, eyes narrowed in confusion. I don't know what's happened to him, but it's not the same man we knew. Kweku stopped before the elder council, his face a mask of calm. Elder Mbeki, seeing the change in him, narrowed his eyes and motioned for the others to be silent. The villagers gathered, their curiosity piqued by Kweku's return. My son, Elder Mbeki said, his voice heavy with concern. Where have you been? What happened to you? Kweku's voice was low but clear. I have seen the ancestors, elders. They have spoken, and their message must be delivered. A murmur ran through the crowd. The elders exchanged worried glances. Some believed Kweku to be a man touched by the spirits, while others feared he had brought some dark curse back with him. But none could deny the power that seemed to radiate from him. The ancestors do not speak lightly, Elder Mbeki continued, his tone cautious. What message do they bring? Kweku raised his head, his eyes focused but distant. There is a curse upon us, a curse tied to a lost artifact, stolen generations ago. The staff of our ancestors, the one meant to bridge the living and the dead. The curse was unleashed when it was taken. Until it is returned, we will suffer. A tense silence followed. The villagers were divided. Some believed Kweku's words, while others doubted him. Whispers began to spread. Was this truly the message of the ancestors? Or had Kweku gone mad? The next day, Kweku was summoned to the Council of Elders. The village gathered in the square as they took their seats in a circle, the air thick with unease. Kweku stood in the center, his expression unchanged, as if he was merely the messenger, not the one carrying the burden of the message. You say the artifact was stolen? Elder Mbeki began, his voice steady, but his eyes searching. Kweku's face. How do you know this? And why have the ancestors waited so long to reveal this truth? The staff was hidden, Kweku explained. Its theft weakened our connection to the ancestors. The betrayal was not just by one, but by many. Those who feared the power of the staff. The ancestors showed me a vision, and they demand that the artifact be returned, or else the curse will consume us. The elders shifted uneasily in their seats. A curse is a heavy thing, Elder Mbeki said, shaking his head. If what you say is true, then this village has lived under that curse for far too long. Tell us more of the staff, Bibi Ya, a respected elder, urged. What does it mean to our people? Kweku paused as though searching for the right words. The staff is sacred. It is the symbol of our bond with the ancestors. It was meant to guide us, to protect us. It must be restored, or our connection with the spirits will forever be severed. Some of the villagers nodded, eyes filled with fear and belief. But others remained skeptical, like Adisa, who stood from his place near the edge of the gathering. This sounds like superstition, he said sharply. Kweku has been gone too long. How can we trust his words? Kweku turned to face him, his voice steady but filled with urgency. The ancestors have spoken, Adisa. Whether you believe me or not, the truth cannot be ignored. Adisa's face darkened with suspicion. And who are we to believe? Kweku, who has returned from the dead, or the elders who have lived by the traditions of our people? The council was split, with those who feared the curse and believed in Kweku's vision, and others who insisted that the village had lived without the staff for generations and survived. Tensions grew, but Kweku knew that the path ahead would not be easy. It was not just about finding the staff, it was about finding the truth, and truth had a way of splitting families and communities. Kweku's dreams that night were vivid. In his vision, the ancestors spoke directly to him. They revealed the staff's theft, and Kweku saw in his dream the faces of those who had hidden it. His mind focused on Adisa's ancestors, who, in the vision, had taken the staff to prevent its power from being misused. The vision was clear. The betrayal had deep roots. The next day, Kweku stood before the villagers once more. His expression was grave. The ancestors have shown me the truth. Adisa's family is responsible for hiding the staff. They feared its power and kept it hidden. This is the betrayal that has cursed us all. Adisa's face flushed with anger. You lie, he shouted. I do not know what you speak of. My family has never betrayed anyone. But Kweku did not falter. The ancestors are not wrong. Their vision is clear. You must face this truth, Adisa. Your family's actions have caused this curse. The air in the village square grew tense. Adisa glared at Kweku, and for a moment, it seemed as if conflict would break out right there. But instead, Adisa turned, his hands clenched into fists. I will not stand here and be accused of something I did not do. If you seek the truth, you will find it, but not through your riddles. I will seek the staff myself. With Kweku's vision now clear, the journey to find the artifact began. The villagers gathered, and Kweku led a small group into the forest. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and the trees whispered secrets of their own. Danger lay ahead, but Kweku's heart was resolute. The group faced challenges at every turn, collapsing bridges, dangerous animals, and strange whispers in the wind. But each challenge only strengthened their resolve. Kweku guided them through the forest, step by step, his connection to the ancestors as strong as ever. Yet, even as they drew closer to the artifact, Kweku felt a burden on his heart. Adisa stayed behind, his guilt growing with each passing day. Alone in his hut, he sat with his family, his heart heavy. He knew the truth now. His ancestors had hidden the staff for the sake of power. They feared the artifact's ability to unite, but now it had torn his village apart. Father, his son said quietly, do we not owe it to our people to tell the truth? Adisa's eyes filled with sorrow. If I reveal the truth, our family will be ruined. We will be forever marked as the betrayers. Can I bring shame upon my ancestors? His wife, seeing his inner struggle, took his hand. But hiding the truth will bring us no peace. We must be honest, Adisa. With a heavy heart, Adisa rose and left the hut. He knew what he must do. He could no longer hide from the truth. It was time to face the consequences of his family's actions. The group of villagers stood at the edge of the dense forest, the ancient cave hidden somewhere deep inside, its exact location uncertain. The path was dark, shrouded in mystery, but Kweku, now emboldened by the ancestors' visions, pressed forward without hesitation. The air was thick, and the land felt ancient, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. "This is the place," Kweku said, his voice calm but determined. His hand brushed the markings on the stone, the ancient carvings that had been worn down over time but still held significance. "The ancestors have guided us here." The villagers hesitated, their bodies stiff with uncertainty. There was fear in the air, but also a spark of hope. They could feel the gravity of their mission. They were standing on the threshold of something beyond their understanding, something tied to the village's very survival. "We've come this far," said one of the men, a younger villager named Kojo. "We must press on. If Kweku is right, then this is the moment we've all been waiting for." Another, an elder named Osei, was less certain. "The path is fraught with danger. We have heard of such places in stories, but none have dared venture here for generations. What if it's a trap?" Kweku turned and met Osei's gaze. "If we are to survive the curse, we must have faith. The ancestors have spoken to me. The staff is here, waiting to be found. We must restore it to its rightful place." Osei nodded slowly, though his face was filled with doubt. "Then we walked together." And so, the group entered the cave. The shadows stretched long as they ventured deeper, the smell of damp earth mixing with the faint scent of herbs and incense. The path was narrow, and the air grew colder, but Kweku moved with purpose, following the directions revealed to him in his dreams. As they moved deeper into the cave, the walls began to change. Faint, glowing symbols appeared, marking their path. Some of the villagers gasped as they recognized the symbols. These were the markings of the ancestors, signs of their protection. "The ancestors' trail," Kweku murmured. "We are on the right path." But soon, the quiet of the cave was broken by an unsettling noise. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and stones started to fall from the ceiling, narrowly missing the group. A loud crashing sound echoed through the cave, making the walls seem alive. "Get down!" Kweku shouted, pulling one of the villagers to safety, as a large rock dropped just inches from them. The group scrambled, their movements frantic, but Kweku remained calm, his eyes fixed on the symbols ahead. "We are being tested," he said. "Stay close to me." A low, eerie whisper filled the air. It seemed to come from the walls themselves, the ancient stones speaking in tongues only Kweku could understand. "It is the trial of the spirits," Kweku said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We must remain steady." With every step, the challenges grew more intense. The ground shifted beneath them, paths collapsed, and more traps triggered. But Kweku, unwavering, continued to lead. Each time they narrowly escaped danger, Kweku deciphered the symbols with precision, guiding the group through the labyrinth. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the heart of the cave. At the center, bathed in an otherworldly glow, was the artifact, the staff. It was set on an ornate pedestal, surrounded by a faint golden light. The staff was old, its surface covered in intricate carvings, but it still pulsed with power. The group stood in awe, their breath catching in their throats. "We've found it," Kweku whispered. The moment Kweku stepped closer, the cave trembled once again. The air grew thick, and a deep, resonant voice echoed through the chamber. "The truth must be faced, or the curse will remain." The ground beneath them seemed to shift, and the walls glowed brighter. The voice filled the entire chamber, louder, now as if the very spirits of the ancestors were speaking. "Who speaks?" Kweku demanded, his voice strong yet respectful. The voice responded, "We are the ancestors. We watch over you all. The staff was taken from us, and the bond between the living and the dead was broken. You have returned what was stolen. But be warned, this truth will change everything." The staff began to glow even brighter, and Kweku's vision blurred for a moment. He saw flashes of the past, betrayal, greed, and the breaking of the sacred trust that bound the two clans. The ancestors showed him the ancient theft of the staff, the cause of the curse that had plagued the village for generations. "Return the staff to its rightful place," the voice commanded. "Only then can the curse be lifted." Kweku nodded and carefully approached the pedestal, his hands trembling. He reached out and grasped the staff, feeling its power course through him. The moment his fingers touched it, the cave shook violently. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, and a bright light filled the chamber. When the light faded, the voice of the ancestors was gone, and the cave returned to silence. The staff in Kweku's hands seemed to hum with energy, and the group stood, in awe. "We must return to the village," Kweku said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "The ancestors have spoken. The curse will end, but only if we do what is right." As the group made their way back to the village, they encountered a new challenge. As they approached the clearing near the village, they were met by a rival clan, their leader stepping forward with a look of contempt. "The staff belongs to us," the leader said, his voice cold. "It was stolen from us long ago. We demand its return." The villagers stood frozen, some fearful, others angry. Kweku held the staff high, his eyes locked on the rival clan's leader. "The staff does not belong to you," Kweku said. "It belongs to no one clan. It was meant to unite us." The rival clan leader laughed bitterly. "You speak of unity, but it is too late for that. The staff was never meant to be in your hands. It belongs to our ancestors, not yours." "The ancestors have spoken," Kweku replied, his voice filled with the weight of truth. "The staff was meant to unite us, but greed and betrayal have kept it apart. Both clans share responsibility for what has happened." The rival clan leader's face darkened. "I will not be lectured by a man who has come back from the dead. Hand over the staff." The tension in the air was thick, and Kweku knew that this moment would determine the future of their people. "The staff will not return to you," he said firmly. "Not until both clans face the truth and reconcile." With those words, Kweku raised the staff high above his head. A bright light erupted from the artifact, and the voices of the ancestors filled the air, silencing the crowd. "The staff was meant to unite the clans," the voices echoed. "Greed and betrayal have torn them apart. Both clans are guilty." The rival clan leader faltered, his gaze shifting nervously. The staff's light seemed to reveal the truth of their past, the betrayal, the greed, and the division that had plagued them for generations. The rival clan leader lowered his weapon, his shoulders slumped. I did not know," he said, his voice filled with shame. "We have all been wrong." Adisa stepped forward, his heart heavy. "It is true," he said, his voice shaking. "My ancestors hid the staff, fearing its power. We took it to protect ourselves, but in doing so, we divided our people." The rival clan leader looked at Adisa, his expression filled with shock and realization. You have spoken the truth. Your ancestors, my ancestors, we all share blame." The tension in the air dissolved as both clans recognized their shared guilt. Kweku lowered the staff, and the light began to fade. The two leaders, once divided by bitterness and betrayal, now stood together. "Let us unite," Kweku said, his voice filled with hope. "The staff is no longer a symbol of division. It is a symbol of our shared responsibility. Together we will restore the bond between the living and the dead." The rival clan leader extended his hand, and Elder Mbeki, representing the other clan, took it. "This is the beginning of a new chapter," Mbeki said. "One of unity, not division." Both clans agreed to share guardianship of the staff. Elder, Mbeki and the rival clan leader stood together, their hands clasped, signaling the end of old divisions. The curse was lifted, and peace began to settle over the village. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the village square. The people of the village gathered, their voices a soft hum of anticipation. The two clans, once divided by bitterness and betrayal, stood on either side of the square, their eyes filled with uncertainty, but also a flicker of hope. The staff, now restored to its rightful place, rested between the clans, its presence both a symbol and a challenge. Elder Mbeki stood in front of the gathered villagers, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes reflecting the wisdom of many years. "This day marks the end of a long chapter in our history," he began, his voice rich with authority. "For generations we have carried the weight of division. We have fought amongst ourselves, and in doing so, we have neglected the will of the ancestors." The rival clan leader, a tall, imposing man named Kofi, stood beside him, his arms crossed. His face was stern, but there was a flicker of something else. Regret, perhaps, or a deep longing for peace. "The ancestors spoke of unity," Kofi said, his voice carrying through the square. "And now, we are here to make that a reality. We agree that the staff must be shared. It is not the property of one, but the legacy of all." Murmurs of agreement rippled through both clans, though there were still those who hesitated, unsure if unity could truly be achieved. Elder Mbeki raised his hand, and the crowd fell silent. "Today, we pledge to protect this staff, to honor the will of the ancestors, and to build a future where our children will know peace. The staff will no longer be a symbol of division, but of our shared responsibility. From this moment forward, we are one." Kofi extended his hand to Elder Mbeki, and after a brief pause, the elder took it firmly. The gesture was a powerful symbol, one of reconciliation, one that would bind both clans together for the first time in generations. The villagers cheered, but there were tears in their eyes, for they understood the weight of what had just occurred. It was not simply an agreement, it was a promise that the mistakes of the past would not define them, a promise that the future would be different. The air grew still as the artifact, the staff, began to glow softly. The voices of the ancestors, once distant and angry, now filled the air, their presence undeniable. They spoke in a language that transcended time, a language understood by every villager present, regardless of age or clan. "The curse is lifted," the voices said. "Peace is restored. This village is blessed." The light from the staff grew, brighter, casting a warm glow over the village, touching every face, every home. It was as if the land itself was breathing a sigh of relief. The villagers stood in awe, their hearts swelling with gratitude. The weight that had hung over them for so long was finally lifted. The ancestors were pleased. "We have watched you," the ancestors' voices continued. "We have seen your struggle. Now you must walk the path of unity, for the bond between the living and the dead is sacred. Honor it, and your people will prosper." As the voices faded, a deep silence settled over the square. The villagers stood still, the reality of the moment sinking in. The curse was gone, and peace had returned to their land. Kweku stepped forward, the weight of his task now fully realized. The staff, now calm, was in his hands, but he knew it was not meant for him alone. He turned to face the villagers, his heart full of gratitude and humility. "My people," Kweku began, his voice strong but full of emotion. "I have walked this path because I was guided by the ancestors. I came back from the dead, not for myself, but for all of us. The ancestors have spoken, and it is their will that we now walk forward together." He looked out across the gathered villagers, each face a mix of joy, relief, and hope. "I thank you for your trust, for believing in me. But now, my task is complete. The staff is where it belongs. The curse is gone. I must now return to the ancestors, for they have called me home." Kweku's words struck deep in the hearts of the villagers. They knew this was his final act of service, the final step in his journey. They had seen him as a messenger, a guide, but now he was to be with the ancestors once more. "I am grateful to have served you," Kweku continued. "I leave you with the strength to move forward. You are no longer bound by the past. Your future is in your hands." With those final words, Kweku turned and walked toward the edge of the village. The villagers watched in silence, knowing that he was not simply leaving. They were letting go of a part of their history, a chapter that had been marked by pain and division. But they also knew that Kweku's departure was a sign of their new beginning. As he disappeared into the forest, The villagers did not speak. They simply stood together, knowing that they had been part of something much larger than themselves. The following days were marked by a sense of unity the village had never known. The clans came together to celebrate, to heal, and to lay the foundations for a new era. They sang songs of their ancestors, recounting tales of old and lighting a sacred fire that burned brightly in the center of the square. The fire was more than just a symbol of warmth. It was a symbol of the shared commitment to the ancestors and to each other. The people danced around it, their voices lifted in song, their feet moving in rhythm with the heartbeat of the earth. For the first time in generations, they were united, no longer bound by the grudges of the past. Elder Mbeki stepped forward, his voice strong as he addressed the gathered villagers. Today, we stand together as one. The ancestors have spoken, and we have listened. This staff, this symbol of our unity, will guide us. But it is not the staff alone that will keep us strong. It is our commitment to each other, our willingness to forgive, and our understanding that we are stronger together than apart. He raised his hand to the sky, and the villagers joined him in unison. Let us honor the ancestors by living as one. Let us pass on this lesson to our children, so that they may never forget what it means to be united. As the days passed, the elders gathered the children of the village to tell them the story of the artifact and the curse that had once bound their people. The elders spoke of the mistakes of the past, but also of the strength it took to face those mistakes and to come together. This is our story, Elder Mbeki said, his voice gentle as he looked at the young faces before him. The staff was taken from us long ago, and it caused a rift between our people. But the ancestors spoke, and they showed us the way back to each other. We are stronger because we faced the truth, because we united. The children listened attentively, their eyes wide with wonder. They understood that this was not just a story, it was a lesson, a guide for their lives. Remember this, Elder Mbeki said, his voice firm. Greed and division only bring destruction, but truth, honesty, and unity can heal even the deepest wounds. The artifact was placed in the village shrine, a place of honor and reverence. It was no longer just a relic, it was a living symbol of the bond between the ancestors and the people. The villagers worked together, rebuilding their homes and strengthening their community, knowing that their strength lay in their unity. As they looked to the future, they knew that they would carry the lessons of the past with them. They would teach their children the importance of shared responsibility, mutual respect, and the wisdom of the ancestors. The staff was not just a reminder of their past, it was a guide for their future. And so, the village prospered. The curse was lifted, the clans were united, and the ancestors' blessing remained upon them. The legacy of the past had been healed, and a new chapter had begun. The air was thick with the weight of the moment as the villagers gathered beneath the great baobab tree in the center of the village square. The sun had begun to set, casting a golden glow across the land. But the villagers were not there to watch the day fade. They were there to witness something much larger than the setting sun, to witness the dawning of a new chapter in their history. For generations, the village had been torn apart by grudges, mistrust, and hidden truths. But now, after many trials, the time for healing had come. The clans had come together, and though their past was filled with pain, they stood united in this moment of peace. The curse that had loomed over them was gone, and with it, the weight of their past mistakes. Elder Mbeki stepped forward, his presence commanding the attention of everyone in the square. His voice was steady, though his heart beat faster than usual. "My people," he began, his deep voice resonating through the gathering. "For too long we have allowed our differences to divide us. We have turned our backs on the wisdom of the ancestors, and in doing so, we have allowed the darkness to grow between us. But now, we stand together, united in purpose and spirit." The villagers listened, their eyes wide, their hearts heavy with the weight of both the past and the hope of the future. Some, like Kofi, the leader of the rival clan, nodded slowly. Others, still unsure of the change they had witnessed, stood in silence. But all were present, all were listening. Reconciliation is not a simple thing, Elder Mbeki continued. It takes strength. It takes humility. It takes a willingness to look at the past with clear eyes, to confront our wrongs, and to move forward together. Today, we make a vow to our ancestors and to each other. We will not let division rule us again. We will reconcile our differences so that our children may know peace. Kofi, his eyes now filled with a mixture of sorrow and understanding, stepped forward. I was blind, he admitted, his voice soft but filled with emotion. I allowed the hatred between our people to grow. I allowed fear to cloud my judgment. But I see now that our ancestors did not want us divided. They wanted us to live as one. I vow today to work with all of you, to heal the wounds of the past. The villagers murmured in agreement, their voices a mixture of relief and hope. Elder Mbeki nodded approvingly. This is the strength of a community, the ability to acknowledge its mistakes, to come together, and to grow. It is not enough to forgive the past. We must learn from it, so that we may build a future worthy of the us ancestors. The next day, the village gathered once more, this time to honor the bond between the living and the ancestors. The sacred fire was lit, and the air was thick with incense, the smoke rising in tendrils toward the heavens. The artifact, the sacred staff, was placed in the center of the square, where it had once been lost, but was now returned to its rightful place. Kweku, who had once been the messenger of the ancestors, stood with the elders, his eyes scanning the gathered villagers. He could feel the weight of the moment, the weight of the ancestors' approval, the weight of their trust. We are not alone, he said, his voice reverberating through the square. The living and the dead are not separate. They are one. The ancestors walk with us, guiding us, protecting us. Their strength is our strength. The villagers knelt before the fire, their heads bowed in respect. The flames crackled and popped, dancing as if in celebration. In that moment, the bond between the living and the ancestors felt stronger than it ever had before. It was not a bond of fear, but a bond of respect. Respect for the wisdom of those who had come before, and respect for the responsibility of those who lived now. Today, Kweku continued, we honor the ancestors and all they have given us. We remember their sacrifices, and we carry their wisdom forward. But we also remember that they trusted us to carry their legacy. We are the ones who must ensure that their teachings are passed on, that the unity they fought for is never lost again. The villagers stood, their hearts swelling with a renewed sense of purpose. They understood now that their connection to the ancestors was not just a matter of ritual, it was a living, breathing thing. It was a bond that demanded respect and care, a bond that could not be broken. As the sun began to set, the village held a grand ceremony, one that would mark the beginning of their new era. They sang songs of joy and unity, their voices rising in harmony. The drummers beat their rhythms, the music carrying the energy of the land, the energy of the ancestors. The people danced, their movements fluid, their bodies swaying to the beat of the drums. Elder Mbeki, his face illuminated by the firelight, stood at the front of the crowd, his hands raised high in a gesture of blessing. We are one, he said, his voice clear and strong. We are no longer bound by fear or hatred. We are bound by the shared responsibility of our people, by the sacred trust of the ancestors. Today, we make a vow, not only to each other, but to our children and our children's children. We will stand together, always. Kofi, standing beside Elder Mbeki, nodded. The staff is no longer a symbol of division, he said. It is a symbol of our unity. It is the symbol of the bond between the living and the dead, between us all. We will guard it together, for the good of all. The clans danced together, their movements synchronized, their spirits united. For the first time in many generations, they were truly one. The division that had once threatened to tear them apart was now a thing of the past. The fire burned brightly, casting shadows that danced like spirits in the night. As the ceremony came to a close, the elders gathered the children of the village. They sat in a circle, their faces eager and curious, ready to hear the stories of their people. The elders began to speak, recounting the story of the staff, of the curse that had plagued them, and of the lessons they had learned. The staff was not just a symbol of power, Elder Mbeki said, his voice rich with the weight of history. It was a symbol of responsibility. The ancestors gave it to us not to divide us, but to unite us. They entrusted us with their wisdom, and now we must pass that wisdom on to you. We must teach you the importance of unity, of respect, and of understanding. The children listened intently, their faces reflecting the seriousness of the words. They understood that this was not just a story. It was a lesson that would guide them for the rest of their lives. You must remember, Elder Mbeki continued, that greed and division lead to destruction, but truth and unity can heal even the deepest wounds. The strength of our people lies in our ability to come together, to work together, to protect one another. In the years that followed, the village flourished. The artifact remained in the village shrine, a constant reminder of the bond between the living and the dead, a symbol of the unity that had been forged. The clans worked together to build a stronger community, teaching their children the importance of shared responsibility, mutual respect, and the wisdom of the ancestors. The village became a place of peace and prosperity, a place where the past was honored, but the future was built together. And as the generations passed, the lessons of reconciliation and growth were passed down, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. For the first time in many years, the village knew true harmony, and as they looked to the future, they knew that the strength of their community lay not in what they had achieved, but in how they had come together to face the challenges of the past and the promise of the future.